hope in the dark and Rebecca's work, feeling really deeply disillusioned and kind of questioning for the first time or facing the reality that, perhaps we are going to fail by many measures. And, perhaps I'm not enough as an activist. When I first came upon the book, and it was a time when I was like very ill. Like I hadn't been well in maybe like 12 months. I had chest infection after chest infection. I had pneumonia at one point, but I didn't take any time off to like rest or get better because, again, of this like internalized urgency and just pressure to kind of keep going. And Rebecca's work was really, I suppose, just quite revolutionary for me because she spoke to the kind of context and history of activism. She really grounded it in, all of the kind of liberties and freedoms that we do have today are a direct result of the activists who have come before us, whether it was, the suffragist movement, the suffragettes, or the civil rights movement, or anti-apartheid, or, Occupy Wall Street, the Stonewall Uprising. We are part of this kind of lineage and this ancestry of activism. By looking at the history of these people-powered movements, she was able to demonstrate that, real change, it comes from people working in collective. She really reframed in my mind this idea that hope isn't, this kind of hollow belief that everything is going to be fine. Hope is being able to embrace the unknown, and hope is almost an act of resistance in the face of these tremendous powers that are working very hard to facilitate and add fuel to our kind of despair and disillusionment. The incredible people-powered movements who fought for so many of the rights we have today, they were often acting in the face of such tremendous opposition, where they didn't act because they knew they would win, but they acted simply from this like knowing that it was the right thing to do. Really being intentional about what you're seeding into the world. I think the mainstream media, it is so negatively geared, and that's not to detract from the fact that, it is all happening and it is really bad, but we begin to gain such a distorted kind of view of the world and also of our own role in it. Once upon a time, in the age before social media, you'd primarily be learning about the issues happening on your doorstep or in your community. Ergo, you would be much more connected to a sense of agency because there's a visceral connection to that issue. There's probably something quite immediate that you can do about it. And yet now we're on this like constant pulse of doom scrolling. It's this constant kind of onslaught of information, and some really interesting research has been done into the kind of cognitive overload, the very simple fact that we lose our capacity to empathize, to connect viscerally with these issues because we actually can't hold space for all of them. And that also really shutters our capacity to see all of the incredible work that is being done. There are myriad people around the world who are leading incredible projects, leading solutions, who are kind of on those front lines, and yet we're not hearing their stories, or at least they're not being platformed. And so making a really intentional decision around, okay, yes, it's bad. There are lots of things going wrong, but what do I actually want to seed into the world? And how do I do that in a way where I'm not attached to the outcome, because there's no way of me knowing what that will kind of manifest. And odds are, if I kind of show up with commitment and consistency, it's going to manifest really incredible things that I can't even, foresee or estimate. We're constantly creating kind of these ripples in the world around us, and we just have to trust in the enoughness of taking those actions. So I feel like a lot of this book is kind of a spiritual meditation on what it means to show up in these really difficult and trying times, and how to do it in a way that stays rooted in community, and how to do it in a way that embodies the world that we actually want to bring forth and the world that we want to create, rather than just reacting to the issues and acting from this place of kind of urgency and anger, which can be good catalysts, but can be like fundamentally unsustainable to be able to do this work long term. And my friend has a great quote, which is, it's about being in the world, but not of it, right? So it's it's not going and meditating on a mountainside and removing yourself, or, what's referred to sometimes as like spiritual bypassing, like just getting away from the icky feelings. And I think a lot of like Western interpretations of like Buddhism, for example, have kind of taken that idea, right? Or even the idea that like well-being or focusing on, spirituality, it's to help you become more productive or the best version of yourself. Like these very reductionist kind of ideas that I think can be quite harmful. But it is, how do I show up in a way that does embody, the world that I want to create and that I want to bring into being? And I think the easiest way that I found to do that is through community. So just being surrounded by people who get it, who kind of like share the same values, who pick you up on the days when it's really, really difficult, but you can also strategize with, and who can, call you in at the same time and hold you accountable, which I think is also really important to our movements. And I think it's also just, it's again taking a much more expanded view of how change has happened in the past. We do inherit this incredible kind of legacy of people power. And one of the things that always strikes me is that many of these activists who came from the margins of society, right, and who took action, they weren't alive to see the incredible outcomes and legacy of their actions. And so you simply can't attach to any outcome. And again, be able to show up day in, day out, not because I can look into a crystal ball and know that, we're going to win or we're going to fail, whatever that means. But again, because this moment allows me to kind of be in service. I think an interesting aspect of burnout that people don't often talk about is how addictive that energy can feel as well. Like you're not just exhausted, like you get the high and the adrenaline of being switched on all the time and being dynamic. I remember going to COP26, and in one day I spoke at 7 different events, and I was arriving late to each one and leaving early from them to make the next one. And after that experience, which was really exciting and kind of dynamic and felt important, I lost my voice for like 2 months. Like my body was just like, you need to chill out, you need to stop. But it wasn't until I went back to Australia to visit my grandmother, who was really unwell, and she turned around to me and said, I don't think you're happy. And that was just like a watershed moment where I realized that I hadn't actually been connected to the kind of like joy and like community for a long time. I'd just been really running on fumes. And that also meant that I wasn't able to show up as a leader who I felt kind of proud of. I wasn't making like wise, thoughtful decisions. I was operating from this scarcity of we just need to, keep money coming in, and I don't have time for anything else. I was simultaneously having this kind of like identity crisis of, when I thought about stepping back, I was like, okay, but who am I going to be? Like, and will people interpret that as a failure if I step down? So there was just a lot of baggage that I kind of had to work through. I really just had to level with myself and say, like, I'm going to make myself like irreparably unwell if I don't change something. But that was a really prolonged period of like 4 years of not really, knowing myself and losing touch with my intuition. And I feel like I'm still kind of in like the aftermath of that, of figuring out what comes next.